Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Food4All Campaign Kickoff meeting. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have a really great number of panelists and a number of things that we want to talk to you about, but we're really excited to be here. I'm going to get us started. I'm Betzabel Estudillo. I'm the Senior Advocate with Nourish California, formerly known as the California Food Policy Advocates. We just rebranded, so you can check out our new website and all of our new materials with our new brand. But once again, thank you for joining us. I'm going to get us started now. Oops. So I want to begin with just a couple of housekeeping items. For everyone to just know a little bit more about today's logistics. So this meeting is being recorded at this moment. All of the participants are currently muted, but you can ask a question or you can include a comment in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. This meeting will be conducted in English, but Spanish translation is available, and I'll share in a minute how you can switch over to the Spanish line. If you need any technical support, please let us know in the chat box. We do have someone from our team that can help you with any technical issues in case you can't hear us, or you can't see our screen. So just let us know in the chat box. Ahora lo voy a decir en español. Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos a nuestra primera junta de nuestra campaña Comida para Todos. Bienvenidos. Estamos muy emocionados que nos estén en esta junta. Unas cosas en español, también les quiero dar unas direcciones para que entren a la línea de español. Primero, esta reunión está siendo grabada. Todos los participantes están silenciados y puede hacer una pregunta o puede poner un comentario en el chat que está abajo de su computadora. Hay traducción en español, no voy a ser yo. Hay un botón de interpretación abajo de esta presentación. Lo que puede hacer es que hay un botón donde hay como un mundo, un círculo y un mundo, y usted puede presionar ese botón y seleccionar español y seleccionar silenciar el audio original. Tenemos a nuestra interpretadora, Selena, donde ella le puede dar la interpretación. También tenemos a Ángeles Nelson de nuestro equipo, donde ella también les puede ayudar a las personas que necesitan traducción en español. Y claro, si necesita cualquier asistencia técnica, nos puede saber en el chat abajo de esta presentación también. Muchas gracias por estar aquí y voy a continuar en inglés. So I wanted to get, once again, everyone, for those that have just joined us, thank you for joining the Food4All kickoff meeting. We're excited that everybody is here. I want to just get started with just outlining some meeting objectives. And, I'll talk a little bit about the agenda, just so that folks know why, what we'll be talking about this morning. So we will learn a little bit about the history, the vision, the policy, and the strategy on Food4All. So everything about our campaign. This is something that in Nourish California, along with our partners at the California Immigrant Policy Center, have worked on for a number of years. And so we'll give you a little bit about that history and what we're intending to do in this year. We'll also learn a little bit more about how COVID-19 is impacting food insecurity among immigrant communities across our state. We conducted some great research with our research firm FM3, so we'll have a speaker share some of those learnings. And then we'll discuss how all of you, our partners and advocates, can come together and we can work to modernize our California Food Assistance Program to provide state-funded nutrition benefits to all immigrants, regardless of immigration status. So there'll be an opportunity to learn about how you can join the campaign, and also there's a mini grant opportunity as well. So the meeting agenda, we've just started with welcome and introductions. Like I said, we'll get started with Food4All vision and what we hope to see this year with our campaign. We'll do a little bit of, we'll have our research partner from FM3 share our community focused group learnings on Food for All. We may have a break, about 5 minutes if time permits. Of course, if we're running a little bit behind, unfortunately, we won't be able to have a break. I do think it's really nice to have a break to allow people to get some water, some coffee, go to the restroom really quick. But of course, you can do that throughout the presentation. It is being recorded, so you can definitely look back to what you missed. After that, we'll have a discussion with our consulting firm, Change Communications, who will walk us through our thinking and our development of our campaign brand and messaging. Following Change Communications, we'll have our partners, we'll have our team at Nourish California and our partners at the California Immigrant Policy Center talk about how they can get involved and talk a little bit more about this mini grant opportunity. And then at around 11:20, we'll just highlight key steps and then we'll adjourn. And hopefully we'll be done by 11:30 a.m. But you know, it may go a little over 1 or 2 minutes. So today's speakers, we have a number of speakers that will be talking about the different things in our agenda. On our team, I'll be today's facilitator. Once again, I'm Betzabel Estudillo, I'm the senior advocate, so I'll be moving us along through this meeting and also helping us with the Q&A section. And we also have Jared Call, our senior advocate. We have Gabby Tilley, our policy advocate. I know that folks are on the video, so if you just want to raise your hand or say hello. And then we also have our partners at the California Immigrant Policy Center. We have Orville Thomas, Government Affairs Director. We have Sarah Dar, Policy Director of Health and Public Benefits. And we have Ben Chow, Policy Coordinator of Health and Public Benefits. Our partners at the, what I mentioned, FM3, Fairbank, Muslim, Metz, and Associates, hence why it's called FM3. We have Lucia De Pupo as Senior Researcher, and our partners at Change Communications, we have Dina Segal, Communications Manager, and Anna Gosh, Communications Director. So once again, thank you to our speakers for joining us. We'll hear them throughout the presentation. So I'm gonna hand it over to our first speaker, Jared Call, our Senior Advocate.
Hey everybody, I'm Jared Call. I'm a senior advocate, as Betsy said, with Nourish California, formerly California Food Policy Advocates, and I lead our state legislative agenda. So I'm going to take us through some of the history, talk a little bit about the need. I don't think I need to spend too much time on that. We've got our great researchers at FM3 to take us through some of the findings we found this summer. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Food for All, what got us to this point, which is, I think, an exciting and hopefully really impactful point where we're hoping to make some really big, meaningful, bold, and much needed change to create an equitable food assistance system in the state. I'm also going to turn it over to our partners at CIPC and Orville Thomas to talk a little bit about the context from the immigrant rights perspective, about the need for a truly equitable safety net. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to plan for this year in terms of policy and in terms of our legislative strategy. So that's the roadmap, and I will kick us off now. So I think this is a really great statement just to start with, that food is a basic human right. Food is essential, but far too many Californians, and we've seen that really starkly during this COVID crisis, just don't have enough resources to put the food they need on the table. Interestingly, there is a bill this year with advancing the human right to food. It's SB 108, authored by Senator Hurtado, that is going to set a standard for all state departments and agencies to recognize food as a human right in all the policies they set, the grant agreements that they make. And so we think that's a great sort of banner to carry this message that we're carrying this year with Food for All. So as I said, and as we all know, food insecurity has been really starkly increased during the COVID crisis. But I think it's important to remember that food insecurity was a real problem even before COVID. 1 in 10 Californians face low or very low food security, even before this current problem. And that amounts to, among low-income Californians, almost 5 million adults and 2 million children who don't have enough resources to put food on the table. So that's the broader context of the problem we're trying to solve overall. And we're focused today and with this campaign on of course, our immigrant households who are being shut out of programs like CalFresh and broader federal and state relief programs. So how did we get here? This concept really started, I think, back in 1996, a long time ago, before my time at Nourish California, when in the Clinton administration, they passed a welfare reform law. I am using scare quotes there. And one of the things it did, among some other harmful changes to the food assistance system, is that it did further limit SNAP eligibility for many legal immigrants. And some states, California among them, immediately said, well, if the federal government's not going to do their job in terms of providing food assistance to people who need it, then we're going to step up and do it ourselves. And so Nourish California, then as California Food Policy Advocates, led that effort in California to establish what is now the California Food Assistance Program, or CFAP. And that serves that pretty narrow band of immigrants that lost access in 1996. But that's, I think, really the launching point of this concept of California and some other great states taking the lead and saying, if the federal government's not going to step up, we're going to do what's right. So CFAP has existed since then. It very much mirrors CalFresh. People apply at a county welfare department just like anybody else. And if they're found to qualify for the CFAP program, then they get an EBT card just like anybody else. They get the same kind of notices and forms and the same rules and the same eligibility criteria. It very much piggybacks on CalFresh and the federal EBT system, the electronic benefits transfer system. So we started thinking a few years ago about, well, what can we do purely at the state level to target state-funded nutrition benefits to populations that are being left out of relief or under special circumstances like maybe disasters or the drought. And so we authored legislation AB 164, authored by Dr. Arambula in Fresno, that would have created an EBT system that was flexible, so we could target benefits to a population that maybe, again, was impacted by a disaster that wasn't declared a federal disaster, or maybe we could target extra benefits to extra vulnerable populations. And also immigrants being a big piece of the picture in terms of populations that were being left out. Now, ultimately, that legislation didn't pass, but it set the stage for us to keep going. And in the two successive years, we were able to secure funding for 2 pilot projects. One, to test this concept of state-funded benefits to people who don't have safe drinking water and are using their CalFresh benefits to buy bottled water. And another, the fruit and vegetable EBT pilot project, which is going to test EBT benefits for people who could get sort of a supplemental benefit for buying California-grown fresh fruits and vegetables. And we're really excited. Both those pilots are set to launch this year, and that's another way to just test this concept again of supplemental state benefits. And then just a couple years ago, the state went further when the eligibility expansion to SSI recipients happened. They created 2 state-funded programs, the Transitional Nutrition Benefit and the Supplemental Nutrition Benefit programs that, again, provide state-funded benefits to SSI households that would have lost or benefits or eligibility due to that policy change. And so these are proven concepts now in terms of providing state-funded benefits completely separated from the federal system. So now we've got this concept kind of well cooked. And so then in 2018, we really wanted to focus on the largest population of people being left out, and that's obviously immigrants who are ineligible for CalFresh solely due to their immigration status. So we were able to get some trailer bill language in the budget that directed the California Department of Social Services, CDSS, to convene quarterly work groups, and we called it the Food4All work group, to explore what the need was, what the potential findings could be in terms of how could we reach this population with nutrition benefits. And that was, again, convened by CDSS. We participated along with our immigrant rights partners at CIPC. The food banks were involved and other stakeholders, and they produced a report in 2019, and one of the key findings was what we're here to talk about today. And that's that California can go this next extra mile and the next step and remove a major barrier by modernizing that CFAP program and removing any exclusions based on immigration status. And we think that's a really key piece of creating a truly equitable safety net. And I think maybe that's a good segue to turn it over to our partners, to turn it over to Orville to talk about the immigrant rights perspective and sort of the broader concept of what we need to be doing to make California a truly equitable state. So I'll turn it over to you, Orville.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. And thank you so much for that history. It should surely show us how much work is left to be done and where we could start this campaign. So COVID-19 really has shown that the holes in the safety net are much larger than we thought, and that our immigrant communities are falling through at a disproportionately high rate. Now, these are the same people that have kept answering the call during the pandemic and serving as essential frontline workers to keep California fed and healthy. And unfortunately, California state government just isn't giving back to us what is deserved. Too many of our immigrant family members continue to be denied access to food and health, and that's why we are all here. CIPC and Nourish California are asking the legislature to act and the governor to accept the premise that no Californian should go hungry. And our request seemingly is very simple, right? Provide food for all. CIPC has a long history of fighting to end the exclusions that prevent immigrants from achieving optimal health and economic opportunity. Throughout the past decade, community orgs have worked together to expand Medi-Cal healthcare coverage to all income eligible children and young adults up to the age of 26, regardless of immigration status. And our community has fought and won some economic security through that same time with the expansion of the earned income tax credit to those that file with an individual taxpayer identification number, or an ITIN. And now we will fight and win food security, because no Californian should be denied those basic needs such as access to food simply because of their immigration status. As we think about a recovery from COVID, we have to learn from the experience of those that have been harmed the most. Equity cannot just be something that we say when talking about policy and budget investments. We need our leaders to really act on issues of equity and fund campaigns that bring us closer to meeting the basic community needs. We cannot be a California for all if we cannot fund and provide food for all. And we want to thank our great partners at Nourish California for years of partnership in this work, in this effort. And we want to thank our community orgs that are joining us today for continuing to step up and fight alongside of our orgs for what is right. You know, we only do this because we do it together and we put that pressure on. CIPC is looking forward to this next effort and this next win. We can't wait to do it. We can't wait to get food for all. Back to you, Jared.
Thanks, Orville. And yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining. I think I see 125 participants. So we're so glad you're out there. And we're going to cover a lot of great stuff and tell you how you can get involved. So I think we thank you for that context, Orville. I think that's the perfect jumping off point to talk about. Okay, so what's the plan? What are we going to do? And I think our message is, as Orville said, is really the time is now. We can't wait. COVID has really shown a really bright light on these inequities and the tattered safety net, particularly for immigrants. So we talked about food insecurity before COVID, but here are just some, again, statistics that people are probably familiar with, but food insecurity is about 2.5 times higher than pre-COVID and significantly for immigrants. And immigrants are being, and those food insecurity statistics are despite what has been done at the federal and state level to increase benefits and increase access. But immigrants, many immigrants are being completely left out of CalFresh and those other relief programs. So there is thankfully some emergency response legislation. AB 221 from Assemblymember Santiago would provide some emergency food relief to immigrants who are being shut out. We're strong supporters of that effort. And we're advancing in parallel a long-term solution to, again, modernize the California Food Assistance Program to provide non-federally funded nutrition benefits to any Californian ineligible for CalFresh solely due to their immigration status. So that's the plan. Build on that existing infrastructure in CFAP and just open it up to everyone who's being excluded.
Thank you so much, Jared and Orville, for laying that out for folks. I'm gonna take maybe a minute or two to see if there's any questions. Now, because I'm sharing my screen, unfortunately, I'm not able to see the chat box with questions. So maybe Gabby, could you help to see if there's any questions on both the chat box and the Q&A box?
Yep, no questions yet, but I'll keep an eye on them.
Okay. Once again, I think just to reiterate sort of the points that Orville and Jared have made while we wait for if there are any questions. We have seen how COVID-19 has impacted our immigrant communities and their ability to access food. This is not a new issue. We know that our immigrant communities have been impacted pre-COVID, but COVID-19 has just significantly increased that impacted that issue. So really the time is to do this now in 2021. to be able to look to our California Food Assistance Program to make it a program that's more inclusive, more powerful, and to include many other immigrants that are currently excluded from food assistance. Some of those immigrants are undocumented, DACA recipients, TPS, and others. But really, we just want to make sure that CFAP, or as we call it, is just, it doesn't have any exclusions based on immigration status. So we look, I'm going to have, are there any questions, Gabby, or anything?
Yes, we got one here from Karen Giron. So the state program will not involve CalFresh at all. Will we need to partner with a separate agency if we partner with CAFP?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, so the way it would work is essentially CFAP would function as another branch or bureau within the CalFresh department, but without any ties to USDA or the federal government. So our vision is that it would in every way mirror CalFresh, including in terms of outreach partnerships.
And do we have an estimate on the number of immigrants who would be eligible if it were expanded?
We have some estimates. They are difficult to pin down, but I think what we've seen in terms of eligibility by 200% or of the federal poverty level or under, which is the official federal poverty level for CalFresh, is that probably between 1 million and 1.5 million immigrants. I don't know if Orville or others have other information on that, but that's what we've seen.
And would people have to fill out a separate application for this versus regular CalFresh?
The vision is it would be the same as the current CFAP program, just more people would be eligible. So if you see CFAP forms, they're identical to every CalFresh form, except for they say California Food Assistance Program at the top instead of that CalFresh logo, but all of the forms are the same.
And so that wouldn't have the same exemptions that CalFresh has, like for students?
Every eligibility criteria in CalFresh would be carried forward, so it would be just the same.
And someone else asked a similar question about criteria, so same as CalFresh.
Yep. The difference would be between CFAP now and the modernized CFAP is solely who would be eligible, and there would be 0 exclusions.
And what about public charge? And there's a lot of concerns around CalFresh and public charge. Would that affect?
No, these are state-funded benefits, so there's no public charge interaction whatsoever.
Could you apply for CFAP through getcalfresh.org?
You know, I'm not sure, but I think the vision would be that it would work through the current CalSAWS system, and people may know that the CalSAWS consolidation project, one of the first things that's going to launch there is a statewide portal, and it's our understanding that once that is fully implemented, that getcalfresh.org may actually go away. So it would be through the same CalFresh and CalSAWS statewide online portal.
And another about application processes. In regards to providing identifications, what would be acceptable?
The same things that would be required for CalFresh other than anything related to immigration status. These are great detailed questions. We're working it out. Thanks.
Yeah, I love them. Keep them coming. We have a few more minutes for questions. Oh, here's another one. Would single unemployed people need to do a workforce project like they are for CalFresh?
No, that's something we would want to talk about. There are some rules in CalFresh that we'd like to see go away at the federal level. And I think that we would definitely want to be open to discussions about eliminating bad rules that limit access. But at the same time, the thought here is to really mirror CalFresh and provide an equal and equitable experience. So certainly open to that.
And could a household get CalFresh and CFAP at the same time, like for mixed status households?
Yep, just as happens now.
Do they have to do 2 separate applications, or would you just apply for a whole household at once?
We would want to have a single application and a single interview. There's that interview issue with CalFresh. So the idea would be to have a household apply together and then just have the benefits tracked separately.
And then there's another one about concerns around sponsor deeming, that there might be concerns in immigrant families that their sponsor might be liable for their use of public benefits. Is there any thinking about also removing sponsor liability for the use of public benefits?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's why we have such strong partners at CIPC, is to talk through those potential issues. And so thank you for raising that. We'll definitely think through that.
Yeah, really quickly, CIPC and other partners have been working with different legislators to examine the sponsor deeming criteria and the interactions between the state and federal government, and looking at if any legislative fixes need to happen to solve that problem.
Any other questions, Gabby, on the chat boxes?
Nope.
Okay, those are really, really good questions. I wonder if we have some eligibility workers or CalFresh advocates on the line. And once again, continue to have those questions. If we're not able to get to them during this presentation, we certainly will follow up with each and one of you to help you answer. There's a lot of and Jared, maybe you can speak to more to this, but there's definitely a lot of things, parts of this policy that we definitely will need to figure out, and the mechanism and how exactly that looks like to someone that is applying for CFAP. And so definitely, I think some of these questions help us think through what may be coming up for immigrant families or for people that are helping them enroll. So please let us know if you have any other thoughts. We'll have, in the next couple days, we'll certainly have more information in terms of how this policy is developing, and our bill, and more information around how you can engage in some of those legislative efforts. So more to come, definitely following this presentation. All right, so I'm going to move us forward to our next speaker, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second here so that Lucia can use her screen. So we conducted a number of focus groups on Food4All, part of this very larger research project. And our partners at FM3 helped us with this project. We have Lucia Del Pupo, who will, senior researcher, who will walk us through some of those community learnings. So go ahead, Lucia.
Thanks, Betsy, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So as Betsy noted, we completed a statewide research project on behalf of Nourish California. It was a very robust, three-pronged project. I believe the actual whole project summary is about 100 slides long, but today I won't put you through that. We're only going to do about 20 slides. Just a quick run through of our approach. So the research had 3 phases. We conducted in-depth interviews with some of the organization's stakeholders, which then helped inform and really shape the questions that we asked for the subsequent phases, which is what we're going to focus on a little bit more today in this conversation. So the first of these was a survey of 1,000 middle and low-income Californians. So basically, we conducted the survey online with anyone whose household income was $50,000 or less. And the survey was offered in Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, alongside English. And then we did 6 focus groups among middle and low-income Californians. And I'm going to focus on that particularly because that's where we tended to speak most about the Food4All efforts. And so yeah, just quickly, here's the run through of the survey methodology. And the survey was done in October, from the end of October to the beginning of November. And then the focus groups were done right after the election and right before Thanksgiving, the week of November 16th. So everyone recruited for these focus groups was eligible for public benefits and CalFresh and WIC specifically. And then we had some different profiles because there were different topics we wanted to explore. The 3 where we really honed in on Food4All issues were the first one, the younger adults who were in the Inland Empire or broader LA region. And the younger adults actually, to qualify for this group, either had to be the child of an immigrant, a TPS, have TPS status, or a DACA recipient. We also spoke to Spanish-speaking immigrant Californians in the LA area, who also we focused on the Food for All topic. And then finally in the Bay Area, a Cantonese-speaking immigrant Californians. So running through some experiences with the pandemic and food insecurity, and I'm going to jump back and forth in these slides between some of our survey findings and focus group findings, so kind of blending them together. So bear with me as I do that. I'll try and be pretty clear about which is which. So in the survey, we asked a kind of pretty classic questions about food insecurity. So we asked respondents whether they had ever worried about running out of food in the past 12 months before they had money to buy more, or if that had actually happened. So one question is focused on, are you worried it happened? And one is, did you actually run out of food or your food didn't last? And we saw that 3 in 5 worried about that instance. A majority actually had that experience, and 1 in 5 had actually experienced either of those things often. So very stark and high numbers of food insecurity or food hardship among this population. And when we break it out by some different demographic groups, there were definitely some very interesting and notable trends that came up. So one thing that jumped out at us was that household size mattered more than income. As you see there, by income, there is some variation in people's experiences, but frankly, it's not huge differences. But when we looked at income by household size, definitely, if you had a bigger household, you were more likely to worry about running out of food or to have actually run out of food than if you were in a smaller household. We also looked at it by immigrants versus US born. Among immigrants, 71% worried about running out of food compared to 61% of US born respondents. When it actually came to the actually having run out of food, the difference was a little bit closer. There was less of a difference, but the concern was more prevalent among immigrants. And then parents, particularly those with children under 18, were most concerned and most likely to have this experience and face this hardship. And again, this could be correlating with that household size. Obviously, if you have kids, you have a bigger household. But overall, we definitely saw a difference whether someone had children or not. And finally, we also broke it out by ethnicity and age. Latino and African American respondents were more likely to report these concerns than respondents of other ethnic groups. And by age, we generally saw that younger folks, so those 18 to 39, were more likely to also report these concerns. And that cut across many ethnic groups, except among Latinos, where the gap was actually narrower and like this experience was pretty similar regardless of age. We also asked folks about how much need they would have for additional money to get their family the food they need and want. 56% said they had a great deal of or some need. And if you factor in those who even said they had a little need, that bumps up to 80%. When we looked at just immigrants, 64% said they had a great deal of need or some need for additional money for the food they need and want. It's not in the slide deck, but we also talked to people about, what are the forms of help that would be most useful to you right now. In general, people said a stimulus payment. That was kind of the top thing that people ranked as like the most helpful form of assistance across the board. And when we talked about food specifically and accessing healthy foods, they tended to say, money to buy food or free or discounted groceries. Those were kind of the top things that people felt would be most useful for them. So then moving into experiences with public benefits during the pandemic. So across all 6 focus groups, we had this conversation about what the experience of applying for CalFresh is like. And we tended to see that it was mixed. A lot of people saying it's somewhat easy, somewhat difficult. Those who had experience with WIC said WIC had been an easier experience for them. We did discuss some of the changes that had been introduced in response to the pandemic, such as moving applications and interviews to be on the phone and over online. And they had said that those things had been helpful, those who had had those experiences. But most of the challenges that people felt were language barriers, and it wasn't always language barrier in terms of someone not speaking English well or not having their language available, but sometimes it was often English-speaking folks who told us that language barriers were an issue for them too, because the actual language used in the paperwork was confusing. Or sometimes they said the person they were working with, they didn't understand. In fact, there's this comment on the bottom left there from the young adult group. That's one of the DACA recipients, but he was actually a Cal student. So, someone who had applied to college, gone through all that, and still was saying, this paperwork was really confusing for me. There was also concern about how they were treated by the CalFresh employees. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that played out, but that was definitely a concern. And I think one of the participants who had had experience with CalFresh in the past had had a negative experience with an employee. And then when she'd reapplied more recently during the pandemic over the phone, had a great experience. And it kind of changed, you could tell it had changed her whole perception of it. I should note again, I would be remiss to not comment that, focus groups, we're talking to a small subset of people. So we're really hearing about these different unique experiences, but the survey is more where we can kind of generalize the results. But on the whole, what we did see in the focus group setting was that these impacts happen to everyone. Everyone in the groups, regardless of background, was dealing with some of these challenges. And so regardless, though, of some of those challenges in actually accessing the supports, people really highly valued them. Those who didn't have the benefit wished they had it. There was just a sense that overall it's a great program, and those who didn't have access to it wish they did, and were having to engage in kind of very strict budgeting, getting support from their communities to kind of make up for the fact that they didn't have access to CalFresh or WIC in some cases. We also asked in the focus groups about feelings of discrimination about ethnicity, and no one in the groups really felt like they had this experience. When we asked this in the survey, 1 in 5 people said they had experienced racial discrimination in accessing public benefits. And of those 20% who had had that experience, I think it was 80 or 90% said that they were less likely to apply for benefits in the future. So even if it's not on the whole, in relative terms, a huge portion of people, it's having a huge impact on the people who are having those experiences. But what was interesting that came out in the focus groups was this feeling from men that they were being discriminated against for getting help from their families and that they weren't doing a good job of caregiving. One person told a story of feeling like he had to actually bring his kids in to prove that he was a primary caregiver. And then just an overall kind of reluctance to help someone who is asking for help. So as you see on the bottom there, left there, someone in the Spanish speaking group said it was like they didn't want us to ask for help. And what we did see in the survey was that when people did get extra benefits during the pandemic, those were hugely important and beneficial to them. 65% of those who got the additional funds said it helped them last through the whole month. And 1/4 said it made no difference. That's a big chunk seeing some improvement. And then 75% said that it helped them purchase more food and a greater variety than they normally could. And I should note here, we also talked in the focus groups a lot about some of the different benefits that were expanded during the pandemic, such as the pandemic EBT and the emergency allotment. And people really valued those and wanted to see more of them, and we're really grateful for them. So that said, we can dive into kind of the Food for All specific topics. So on the whole, all 3 focus groups, as I noted, where we explored this topic, 2 were actually among immigrants. 1 was kind of mixed between people who had immigrant parents or were DACA or TPS. And there was a sense that the assistance is more limited for immigrants, that immigrants had to rely on food banks and churches to fill the gaps. And many noted, I remember one person in the Cantonese speaking group was like, I don't like American food, but that's what I get at the food bank. And I'll take it because it's what I need and I need food, but it's tough. So those kinds of issues came up. But in general, what we really saw that was an interesting distinction was the 2 groups that were fully immigrants, which also included undocumented immigrants. They were more aware of the barriers than the younger folks were. The younger folks tended to be unaware. There was this vague sense that there was some concern, or, that it could impact their path to citizenship, but it was less concrete than it was among those immigrant groups. That said, most people were confused about the mechanics of it. A few actually used the word public charge, the phrase, but it was very confusing for many people. What was interesting was there was a very distinct sense that political climate mattered. It came up with people that having Trump in office had been kind of scary. And this was right after the election when Biden had just been elected, and they felt like that was a good sign, that having him in office was going to make a difference for them and they would feel more comfortable getting help. And here are some of those comments that people said, but basically on the top left there, the one person noting, people are undocumented and they can't get help. In the Cantonese group, someone noting that they didn't get things they liked. And then I think most relevantly here on the right, this young woman in the young adult group who basically said, I have done everything I can to avoid asking for help because I really want my green card or citizenship in the long run. The only thing I took was unemployment because, I earned that. But definitely notable that even though people don't necessarily know what the steps are, how they're being directly impacted, they know that there is a fear and it is governing their choices and their actions. We asked about the potential for getting some additional help for immigrants, and overall they saw that idea as very helpful. They said, we pay taxes, we deserve to have the same programs as everyone else. And interestingly, those in the young adult group tended to really draw a connection between investing in immigrant families and long-term health of the society and of our state. We tested 3 different proposals when it came to Food for All. So one was the idea of making CalFresh available to all immigrants. One was creating a new program for immigrants, and one was providing a card for food benefits when applying for healthcare. On the whole, people kind of struggled with the distinctions between these programs. It wasn't really clear to them. They tended to choose them based on the one that they thought was most inclusive or easiest to kind of adopt. They definitely all agreed that immigrants deserved help and needed help. I think the main difference between whether they chose the first or the second one was the idea of wanting immigrants to be included so that they weren't singled out versus the idea of, well, there's already programs for other people, so we need a program for us. So that kind of is why there was kind of a tie there in those first 2. But to be honest, it was a little tough for people to really grasp these and have a strong opinion on them. We also asked people to finish the sentence that said, we need a policy that guarantees long-term state-funded food assistance for undocumented immigrants because blank. As you see here was a lot of, it's the right thing to do, it's humanity, there's a lack of work. We went to CalFresh because we had an emergency. How could you live on food stamps? That's not what we're trying to do. And our economy depends on it. So definitely the sense of like, this isn't necessarily something we want to be doing, but we need it because it's the right thing to do. It's human. Everyone deserves access to food. And in fact, we did test some different messages kind of in favor of a Food for All or of expanding the food safety network to include immigrants, all immigrants. And what we saw is that the 2 statements that kind of jumped out the most or were most well-liked were the idea of we're all in this together, we take care of each other, or we all have a right to healthy foods. The statement focusing on immigrants as the backbone of the state's economy didn't really resonate strongly. I think there's the more human element is more persuasive, understandably, to people. And then immigrants take care of us, we must take care of them. People didn't really understand that statement. And frankly, this is not the audience for that statement. So it kind of makes sense that they didn't gravitate towards that. So they like this idea of community and togetherness, or the emphasis on the right to healthy food. Those were 2 things that really stood out positively among respondents. So that said, I'm going to pause there. I realized I zoomed through that, and there was quite a bit in the slide deck, but I'm happy to kind of take any questions that popped up or, yeah. So.
Thank you so much, Lucia. You are amazing. I know we said that, but you helped us put together the surveys, the stakeholder interviews, and particularly these Food for All focus groups for us. You know, a couple things. The reason we partner with FM3 because we really wanted to hear from community members themselves about what their experience has been like with COVID, right? We know that a lot of immigrants are excluded from a lot of our safety net programs. And now that we, you know, all these new COVID relief opportunities have also been limited to many immigrants. And so we really wanted to hear directly from immigrant folks about what that's like, what their impressions are of a Food for All campaign, what they like to see, and what messages they want us to carry, right? We definitely don't want to do this alone. We see the importance of having our immigrant communities at the forefront of this campaign. So I really appreciate FM3 helping us put together these focus groups and for us to really listen in and hear them loud and clear. And so these learnings, will be taking them as we develop our campaign this year in terms of the policy, the campaign structures with the organizing, and definitely with the communications work that we'll be doing. But I also, just going back to the research proposals, that was particularly striking to me about, you know, I think overall, I think people just wanted to be included and wanted to be part of the same system. So I thought that was pretty helpful to me, because I think as advocates, when we're talking about CalFresh or CFAP and we're getting down to the technical aspects and the wonkiness of policy, we often forget about what is the simplest thing for our immigrant communities? What makes sense, right? How do we not add additional systematic barriers to that? And so I think we've thought about it very carefully. Jared, maybe you can speak a little bit about just sort of the CFAP and CalFresh, because I know that has been coming up for folks a lot, and just to sort of clarify that.
I think I talked a little bit about how the forms are the same and it's the same EBT card. But yeah, I just really want to emphasize that the CFAP experience is invisible to clients. It's the same as CalFresh. You go to the same office, you get the same experience. It's really, again, the same client experience. It's really a behind the scenes budgeting thing for counties about where do the benefits come from? Do they come from the state, or do they come from the feds ultimately? So just, yeah, really wanted to emphasize and clarify that really is the vision, is that it is the same equitable experience for everybody.
Thank you, Jared. And yeah, definitely we want to carry that over based on what we learn of people's impressions about the different proposals. We have a few minutes for questions. I'm wondering if there's any questions. Let me just check here. We have one question from Marcela. Have the findings of these surveys and focus groups been presented to CDSS, or are there any efforts to present these to CDSS? Good question. We have not formally presented these findings to CDSS. We did have a webinar presenting all of these findings about 2 weeks ago, where we had invited our friends and partners. I think this is stuff, some of these pieces are things we'll circle back with CDSS. Obviously, the Food for All piece is something that we'll carry, you know, we'll talk to the department about as we're talking about our policy. But certainly different pieces of this whole research project we'll be talking to the department about. And let me see if there are any other questions here. For those already enrolled in CalFresh for other family members, would they need to go back and ask for CFAP to be applied? Jared, do you want to?
Yeah, so if I understand the question right, so these are households where they're mixed status households, and some members are on CalFresh and others are not qualifying even for CFAP. Then yeah, there would need to be an additional application done for those, to add those additional members to a mixed household, yeah.
And will this be available for all California residents?
all California residents who would qualify for CalFresh under all the criteria, and we're excluding all those immigration criteria. So the income criteria and other rules apply, but we're getting rid of that unfair exclusion based on immigration status.
And will the findings be shared with specific counties? I think sort of similar to how the CDSS question, we certainly will take different pieces of these learnings and we will share them with our with different agencies as they relate to our campaigns. You know, so we will definitely take a lot of what we learn here and apply it to policy, our policy work. So thank you. And this, well, there's another question related more broader to immigration, but I think this might, we'll send it over to Orville to answer at a later moment. Yeah, we'll have that answered later. Lucia, I have one question for you that I've always been curious about. So I know that the focus groups, a lot of the focus groups happened before and after the election. I'm wondering if there is anything that came up differently or impressions about, I know you talked a little bit about the impressions of the potentially at that, in some of the focus groups, potentially new administration. I'm wondering if there was any things that came up in some of the focus groups that were before the election and after the election, especially for the immigrant families.
So they actually all happened after the election. They were all in that week of November 16th. The impressions were already kind of formed by the idea that, but in our stakeholder in-depth interviews that we did, those were prior to the election. They were in September and October. And there we definitely had conversations with the stakeholders, included food banks and other kind of advocacy organizations that support people throughout the state. And there we did have some conversation about how clients had been more intimidated and how the Trump years had kind of created more fear and this palpable fear. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. So we're unfortunately running a little bit behind, so no break, but feel free to go get your coffee or water or restroom break. Like I said, this will be recorded, so you'll have the recording. All the slides will be shared post the presentation, so you'll have all that information. But I want to hand it over to our partners at Change Communications, Anna and Dina, who will actually walk us through some of the communications work that we've done. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of pieces that we've taken from the FM3 research learnings and really thought through about how do we want to message this campaign? How do we want to present our campaign to the world, right? So, well, to the state of California. And so I'm going to hand it over to them to walk us through a few pieces that we've been thinking through, and we also want to hear from you. So, Anna, are you? Okay, I think I see you. So go ahead, Anna and Dina. And I don't know if you might be muted if you're trying to talk, because I don't hear any audio.
I couldn't find my unmute button.
There.
I think everyone can see the slides, yes? We're good there? Okay, great. I just want to also apologize that we're not going to get a break. So maybe just invite everyone to just kind of like wiggle in your chair or standing. Maybe roll your head a little bit. I know that was a lot of rich information. And it definitely has been informing our work as we think about how to articulate this campaign. And see the change we want to achieve, which is food for all. So as Betsabel mentioned, we've been working together for, I think it's been a year or a little over a year now to help articulate the campaign. Change Consulting is a communications firm based in Oakland, California that is solely focused on change makers and using strategic communications as a tool to leverage racial and social justice. So we're really focused there, and we're really excited to be a partner on this project.
Thanks, Anna. And as part of our process, we have a very deep research and insights beginning that we do with all of our clients. And we started working with now Nourish California, when they were California Food Policy Advocates, on strategic communications efforts for Food4All. And obviously the campaign at that point, and still does, leads with the goal of ensuring that all immigrants, regardless of status, have access to healthy food. A lot of our research, as you can see here, was completed right before the pandemic hit, but I think as with the research from the focus groups that was presented, all these food insecurity issues are not new. They were just exacerbated by COVID. And so it really created an urgency and a need for a campaign like Food4All. And so we do obviously a lot of qualitative and quantitative research that includes external stakeholder interviews. We did discovery and strategy workshops with Nourish California and CIPC as well. We reviewed existing research and polls. We reviewed also the focus group research and learnings that were just shared. And we also looked at key learnings from other successful multi-coalition efforts like Health4All, and also considered those when making our insights and recommendations.
So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into some of the top line messaging that we've gathered, we've drafted based on that research we've been doing, as well as some considerations on how we're thinking about pairing the name and the tagline for this campaign. And at the end of this little bit of time, we're going to have a poll because we want to get your opinion about what your preference is for how this campaign is named and identified. So just to set up our process and our approach for this campaign, and for most of the campaign work we do, we follow a model that was developed by the Opportunity Agenda, which is a really smart communications firm. And it follows what we call the VPSA format. And it's a really simple yet compelling approach where we start with the values and the vision that we share with our intended audiences. So what behavioral research tells us is that this is the best way to get people to listen, right? To really understand where are the overlapping values, and where is there a shared vision for a better California and a better world. So as much as possible, we want to start with language that articulates those things. And then we want to go into stating the problem, but we want to make sure that our problem messages frame the problem as a threat to those values and visions specifically. So we will be previewing the messaging we've come up with so far, but this is something that you'll see we intend to really say, you know, these are the things that we agree with, right? So these are the values and visions, and then this is the threat to those shared values and visions. And we don't want to dwell too much on the problem, so then we quickly go into the solutions. And the solution in this situation is this campaign and this bill specifically. So we really want to make sure that the solutions give people a sense of agency, that there's choice, there's motivation, and there's a lot of optimism and hope. And then we have our call to action. And depending on the audience we're speaking to, that call to action will be different, but it's really important that we want to be as specific as possible. And then informed by the message, the suite of messages we created in these categories, we also created an elevator message, which is again just a short introduction to help people make a connection and get interested in the campaign. It is not a kitchen sink where we're trying to say everything about the campaign. We're only trying to say as much so people stay engaged, nod with us, agree with us, and then want to ask follow-up questions, and ideally want to get involved.
Thanks, Anna. So before I have Betsabel and Gabby help us read through some of these key messages, so these are just a few of the key messages that were shaped in the framework from the research that Anna and I shared, and they are from a longer platform that we developed for the campaign. So these are just some high-level highlights that we wanted to share with you. Just to kind of double down on what Anna was saying as well, that messages, while very important because they were informed by research and by the VPSA model, they're not meant to be a script, nor are they stagnant. You are all the issue area experts. These are meant to be you know, adjusted to how you talk to folks and tailored to your approach, and specificities and calls to action would adjust to your audiences and communication needs. So they just build the foundation for communication about Food for All and its impact as well. So I'm going to ask Betsabel and Gabby if you can lead us in just reading some of these key messages here that are on screen.
Sure, I'll take the first two, then Betsy, you want to read the last? Values and vision. As Californians, we share similar values and dreams. We want to make our lives better, take care of our families, and contribute to our communities. This is true whether we are born here or not. Problem. Immigrants are essential, yet immigration-based eligibility restrictions have explicitly and unjustly excluded many low-income and undocumented Californians from accessing affordable food.
Solution. Food for All is the first campaign of its kind to address the longstanding discrimination in our state's nutrition safety net. We advocate for policy that will give all California residents access to food regardless of their immigration status. The action. By coming together to champion Food for All, we have the chance to reshape our institutions and systems to ensure that every Californian has the food they need.
Thank you. And then the elevator pitch.
Sure. Food is a basic human need and should be available to all California residents. Yet current laws limit who is eligible to receive food assistance based on their immigration status. Food for All is a statewide campaign to ensure that all California immigrants have access to the food they need.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And just before we walk you through some of the options for the taglines, we just wanted to share just some of the criteria that we use when formulating and putting together a tagline. And these are just some important things that we consider when making a good tagline and a compelling tagline. So when we started working with Food for All, the campaign name was set, and actually our research that we conducted supported the name. So stakeholders noted that it was something that was really, you know, easy to remember, that it was unifying, it was simple, and it spoke to the essence of the campaign. But when we were continuing to work with Nourish California, we now know that there are different bills coming down the pipeline. There's things that may have similar names, similar goals. And so we asked ourselves if we need to explore other variations of the name as well as when we dig into the taglines. So while we did use this criteria to create the taglines and narrow down the options that we'll be sharing with you on the next screen, we also want to be mindful and take into account this criteria when finalizing what a good tagline should communicate to the outside world. So that includes evoking your why and who you're for, and being, you know, very memorable and succinct. So we also wanted to be mindful of how taglines can be combined with the potential name, potentially a new name, and how those sit with you as Anna goes through them on the next screen.
Thanks, Dina. Yeah, and you'll see here, we basically have 4 finalists that we're working with, and a few iterations of expanding on Food for All as the campaign name. So as I share these on the screen, I want everyone to not only think about the ones you like personally, but think about that criteria that Dina shared. So, ideally, when we're assessing what a good name and tagline combination is, we want to make sure that we're keeping in mind the job that we need this name and tagline to do. So some things to think about is, what is really the brand or the identity and the personality that we want to evoke? What are the goals, the ultimate goals, which is to pass a policy change. And then, of course, we want to evoke the why. So the first pairing, Food for All, until every California immigrant has the food they need. This combination provides clarity and specificity, and we're also really clear about who we're for. The second option, we add immigrants to the name. So Food for All Immigrants, until every Californian has the food they need. For these next two, these actually came from recommendations by the Nourish California staff. And these two are bold, they're memorable, and succinct. So the third option, Food for All, no exceptions, no exclusions. And then the fourth option, Food for All Immigrants, no exceptions, no exclusions. And now I'm going to ask Nourish California to put the poll up, and I would love all participants to go ahead and choose the one that you think does the job we need it to do. And then in real time, we'll be able to see what folks like.
George, could you pull up the poll for us?
Yes, I think everyone's already voting.
Okay.
I think we have 101 people already voted, and that's 100% of the vote, so I'm going to end it now.
I also see that hosts and panelists cannot vote.
Yeah, maybe that's why, yeah, I was like, I can't see the poll, but now I see the results. Thank you.
And here's the results.
Okay. This is interesting to me, and Betsabel, I know we might be running a little bit behind, so we may not have time for discussion, but I see that Food for All, no exceptions, no exclusions, is the winner by a big margin. And that's interesting to me because it doesn't include immigrant or California. So it is more vague. And, there's definitely benefits to that as well, right? So this could be a longer term campaign. It could be something that, of course, this is just the name and tagline. There's going to be there's going to be hashtags, there's going to be messaging that are surrounding it that can provide more specificity.
And there was a comment, 2 comments made that it is vague, but it's inclusive. And people agree with that. Yeah, they love it. It's clear and no need to, include immigrant pieces. But yeah, keep adding any thoughts, impressions. Thank you so much for responding to the poll. For folks that had to hop off, we can find a way to also get your thoughts on these different titles. But I'm also, it's interesting to see everyone's responses to this, because certainly mine vary, and mine, so thank you so much for participating. I'm going to move us forward because we do have a last piece, and I do want to get you guys going by 11:30 a.m. I know we all have very busy days. But thank you so much, Anna and Dina, for working with us and putting together these top line messages and taglines. You guys have been great to work with and definitely hear us and the community of what we like to see. So I'm gonna hand it over to Gabby and Sarah and Ben to lead us through the last piece of our meeting. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Betsy. So now that we know what the policy is, we've got a lot of work to do to actually realize it. So I'm gonna have Sarah and Ben come talk a little bit about what we can expect and why we need a movement.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah with the California Immigrant Policy Center, CIPC. And yeah, like my colleague Orville shared earlier, we are co-sponsoring this legislation this year with Nourish California. And we have really been committed to these types of issues for a very long time. Many of you may be familiar with our Health4All campaign, which is analogous in so many ways, trying to get rid of exclusions that exist in our Medi-Cal program, which is another really important safety net program for healthcare. And with our experience on the Health4All campaign, one thing we've learned is that it's one thing to introduce legislation and to have, wonderful advocates up in Sacramento who talk to legislators and support that legislation, but it speaks volumes and adds so much more power to the ability of these policies to get passed if there is a coalition and grassroots power behind it. If there are constituents across the state that are calling their legislators, that are showing up to committee hearings to do public comment, which is so easy right now because you can just do it on all the committee hearings are on Zoom. So anybody can just call in and get in line to give a public comment at the end. Visiting with legislators is something that we've done a lot for our other campaigns. And then also just like thinking about media and how to tell this story in a more powerful way, how to change the public narrative around the issue, right? Oftentimes policy change happens hand in hand with, or even in response to a change in public opinion. And so how can we all come together to change public opinion? Because that doesn't just happen in the halls of the Capitol building in Sacramento, that happens across the state in conversations that we're having with our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones. And then that impacts legislators and influences legislators because they really ultimately are accountable to their constituents. So if they hear that public opinion actually is in favor of including all Californians in our food system and in CalFresh, regardless of their immigration status or where they're born, then they're more likely to take action on it if they know that their constituents are behind them. So how we do that, and we know this really well from the lessons we've learned on Health4All, is to build a coalition, to build a movement, to have constituents and supporters who are directly impacted and who are closely aligned with the issue, who maybe are service providers. I mean, different stakeholders from various backgrounds all need to have one unified voice, and we've just learned that so keenly from our work in Health4All and other coalitions. And so we're really excited about another campaign that's building on a set of policies that are trying to get us toward more inclusion for immigrants in California. And I just want to really thank Nourish California. We are co-sponsoring this bill with them this year, but as far as pulling together this coalition and organizing us and managing the campaign that's going to come, that's going to require a lot more than just two organizations. They are really taking the lead on that. And we as CIPC are just really eager to be a part of that coalition, sign up for that campaign, and we hope you'll all do the same. And I want to turn it over to my colleague, Benjamin, to share a little bit more about why this issue is so near and dear to our hearts.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, for highlighting, your experience with Food4All and just providing insights on what it will take to win. So what is clear to us is that we won't be able to do this alone, and we will need a broad and diverse community of advocates, organizers, and community members from across every region in California to put pressure on our elected leaders and make sure that all immigrant voices are heard and their needs are met. With our coalition, it will be essential that we bring directly impacted individuals to the table to shape the stories that we tell about food access, to provide their own expertise with their own experiences, and to demonstrate their own power to determine exactly what resources they need for themselves, their families, and their communities. We will need to bring direct service providers and immigrant serving organizations to the table who understand the ins and outs of how these services work on the ground, and to help ensure that what we're proposing and when they're implemented, they truly improve access to these safety net programs. And we will need leaders whose identities inform and enrich our campaign's vision, so our campaign truly represents the broad intersection of communities that represent California. Over the past year, due to the pandemic, evolving public conversations about racial equity and uncertainty over our economy, our climate, and our political system, we know how critical essential basic needs such as food are to keeping our communities safe and secure. Parents are losing their jobs and struggling to put food on the table. Students aren't getting the nutrition they need. But our communities have grown and tapped into mutual aid networks to keep each other afloat. But our communities need much more. And with a safety net, expanded safety net that continues to exclude immigrants based on their status, our immigrant communities need much, much more. The COVID-19 pandemic reminds us how interdependent we are. And until all California's residents have access to nutritious and affordable food, we cannot fully enact our state's values of equity and inclusion. And so at CIPC, we've advocated for policies that uphold this vision of racial, social, and economic justice. And Food4All is one crucial piece of the statewide vision to ensure that immigrants have the ability to plant their roots in the state. Someone in the chat also highlighted public charge. We know that the chilling effect is real, and it affects immigrants beyond the immediate danger it actually poses. And so winning Food4All and making CalFresh available to all low-income immigrants is also one way our state can overcome the lingering effects of public charge and signal to our communities that they are included. Access to food is an essential part of living a full and healthy life, and it's vital for the health and well-being of all of California's residents, regardless of your economic means, immigration status, race, or ethnicity. Every adult and family should be able to access food that nourishes them, and we hope that you continue to join us to make Food4All a reality.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah and Ben. Perfect setup for a call to action, right? Ben laid it out perfectly. There's roles for everybody in this coalition. There's a place for everyone, and we need so many different types of people, right, that can bring all this rich expertise and experience to our coalition and really make sure that it becomes a priority in the legislature and a reality for immigrants. So we invite everyone here on this call and everybody you know and your friends and your family and your coworkers, come on down and join the coalition. We've got varying levels of engagement that you can contribute depending on your capacity, right? We know that everyone's overworked, and especially in this field of nonprofit advocacy, there's a lot of competing things. So we want to make sure that people are not overworking anyone, but there's different levels that you can contribute. Any one of these actions here, or any other action that you might be able to contribute that's not even on this list. See, we're open to anything that you can bring to the table. And for some of the smaller grassroots organizations that we know are stretched thin and have limited budgets, we want to make sure that those people are also part of the coalition. As I was saying, it's important that we really raise the voices of community that's impacted by the problems that we're trying to solve with Food4All. So we need them there, and we need their voices represented. So that's why we have a mini grant opportunity. We're going to be providing 10 mini grants to local grassroots, immigrant rights, and anti-hunger organizations to really kind of build their capacity to mobilize around Food4All. We'll send out some more detail about exactly the exact criteria and what would be expected and how to apply soon. But we want you all to think about this, and if your organization might not fit this criteria, maybe think of some others you know who would love to jump in but just need a little extra support to get going. This is the timeline for the mini grant opportunity. So it's going to be We're going to make the application available on Monday. Everyone who attended this meeting will get it sent to them, and the application will close on February 12th. So it's all happening and it's in motion this month. And so by March, we'll be really in it and be able to engage in some exciting advocacy opportunities. And the level of funding is based on how much engagement and how much need your organization has. So how much you really can to contribute and how much money you really need to do that. And you can find all of this information along with updates about the campaign, how to join the coalition. You can sign up for just newsletter updates, but also you can sign up to be a more active member. And you'll also get action alerts, when it's time to send budget letters or letters of support. All of that will be stored here on our website. So you can check this for updates and for follow-up information to this meeting as well. All right, I'll take it over to Betsy.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you so much. So I don't know if there's any questions for Gabby, Sarah, or Ben. And while if any questions come up, I just, again, want to encourage everyone to join our coalition. This work will not be possible if we don't come together as partners to be able to ensure that all of our immigrant brothers and sisters have access to food assistance through our state program. So we welcome you to engage in whatever capacity you have. Honestly, we know that these are very difficult times and our capacity is very limited for many of us. And that's why we do want to offer those mini grants to people that can help with some, engaging. So we'll have all this information emailed on Monday. So let me see if there's any questions. Okay. Just one question from Rochelle. How can we bring and collaborate with our Black advocate organizers engaged in this work? Gabby, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
So we can find there I am. All right. Yeah, that's a great question, Rochelle, and it's something that we were actually thinking a lot about as part of the Public Charge Coalition too. I know that Benjamin has been doing work to connect with some smaller organizations that specifically serve African American immigrants. That is definitely something we want to build, and if you all have connections, we are looking to build those relationships and really engage all immigrants, right? Because we're not a monolith. There's so much diversity and different cultures that are represented in California, and we want to represent all those voices in this campaign. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Great. I don't see any other questions besides just thank you and for this information. So I just want to wrap it up, a couple key takeaways from today's meeting and then next step. So again, this is a campaign that's being led by Nourish California and the California Immigrant Policy Center, both an anti-hunger, anti-poverty organization and an immigrant rights organization, really coming together to address the inequities in our food system programs in our state. This is going to be a long-term campaign, but we are very hopeful that we will get we will win, and we will make sure that all of our immigrant families have access to food assistance. So our coalition, this is our first campaign kickoff meeting. So in terms of next steps, we will, the meeting is recorded, so you'll get the recording. PowerPoint slides will be shared from all the presenters. We will share some background material, as well as the mini grant application. And also there is going to be a coalition sign-up form that we will be sending out as well. So be on the lookout for that very big email to get more plugged in. And if you have any other thoughts about, if you have any other questions or thoughts about the research component piece that we did with FM3 and the work we did with change communication, please let us know so that we can take this feedback back to our partners. And of course, if you have any other questions about the campaign, the policy, the bill, our upcoming author, let us know. But you will hear, you will actually get more information in the next couple of days because we have really new, exciting information coming soon. But I want to thank all of our speakers from CIPC, Change Communication, FM3, and my colleagues at Nourish California who are speaking or behind the scenes helping us with tech and answering questions. Thank you so much for putting this together. And thank you to everyone who stayed on and participated and asked questions and joined our poll. Have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to working with you hand in hand on this Food4All campaign. Bye, everyone.